put videos up on the internet, you're always going to have all sorts of good and bad responses. And the good responses on this car, I was kind of surprised at how many they were and how long there's been people responding on the videos, even though it's been quite a while since I've worked on this car. A lot of good responses, and then I also got some negative responses, which were also kind of along the lines of like, which I was sort of hoping here, like people be like, oh, that thing's weak, or oh, it needs more power, or whatever. And one lesson that I've learned over the years is that it seems like a lot of people have such a focus on building power out of their cars, or like wanting to do these big, crazy, elaborate builds. And in reality, it's very easy to bite off more than you can chew. You know, like I would have loved to take this 400 apart, checked it out, you know, been dreaming about boring out to a 406, putting nice aluminum heads and you know, really building the thing up, nice chop master camshaft in there. But the reality is it takes a ton of money and time, and you're so much better off having something that's together and there as opposed to, you know, having some hopes and dreams. So sometimes it's a little bit better to bite off like less than you can chew, or, you know, or however you want to say it. But this is a car that I think that, you know, pretty much anyone could do this, and in reality it's a full build. So you're better off going through and doing like a whole, focusing on the entire car instead of just power. You know, if this car had a big motor in it or whatever, it doesn't have the suspension or anything else for it. You know, and one thing that it doesn't have is a good ignition system, good plugs. I never even did any sort of anything. I just pulled this motor out of the other car and I plopped it into here. So of course it's weak and not running well. So I guess really like what I'm kind of getting at is like the best upgrades that you can do for your car is maintenance. You know, this isn't going to be a super in-depth, you know, how-to video. I'm just kind of talking about some of the things that I've kind of learned along the way. So I do want to start this thing up and kind of give a sound check, a visual, I guess, of how it's running now, because it's running really badly. And we can do some tweaking or whatever, and we can kind of maximize what we have here. I'm going to fire the car up with all the old original stuff in here. The you'll hear it missing when I rev it up, and you should see like the boxes and stuff shaking. Like this motor doesn't have a cam or anything, so this thing should really be like a little sewing machine, but it's super rough. Whole car is just shaking. Hear it bog. Yo, the dinosaur is coming. Look at how rough this thing is. I'll see it afterwards. Yeah, I don't think my friend ever changed the plugs when he had this motor. This thing came out of some ramp truck. You can see how nasty all the wires are, and the plugs are gross because I've had them out before. But I'll show you them when I get them all out. But I just want to give you a look at all of this nasty stuff. You know what I mean? Excel Super Cap, that's pretty good. So what I have going back in is just some stock replacement stuff. I got most of it off of Rock Auto. Typically what I do for these cars is I'll buy a complete distributor and wire set. It's like $120 through Speedway Motors or something like that. I went a different route this time because I had a gift card, and so it basically cost me nothing. So I'm gonna go ahead and start getting this apart and get it swapped up. Just started diving into this thing, and look what I come out to find. You think it's running weak because half the rotor's missing? Or half the piece of the contact on the rotor's missing? It wouldn't matter if you had a 383, 410 sprint car motor in this thing. You got this messed up melted distributor parts. Your thing's never gonna run good. So you gotta make sure that you have all your stuff right before you start doing the mods. You know, and this works for everything. Yeah, I'd love to put this thing on slammed on some nice coilovers or whatever, but if my tie rods and my ball joints are bad, the car's still gonna handle like trash. Same thing as this, you know, you gotta start and go through A, B, C, D, make sure everything's good. Yeah, here's the broken rotor and the pieces that I had to dig out of the distributor. Now in here has a performance module already, but I'm gonna be taking that out for what I think is one of my favorite pieces of improvements for a small block Chevy, and that's one of these, or actually really any HEI, they make them for these. It's a Petronix flamethrower, and it has a built-in rev limiter that's adjustable. It's an analog, it flashes. I'm gonna go ahead and get this in the car and show you how that works. This is awesome. It eliminates the need for external ignition box like an MSD or something like that, because those are always problematic. You save on wiring, it's built in, and it also has other features like it can tell when it's starting, and it helps by giving like more spark, I believe, for the starts. So this is a really good piece and something that I like a lot. All right, we have the new rotor with the Petronix in there. I got the distributor cap with the coil and the cover assembled. Funny thing is, I built this car to kind of mirror my first Cutlass build, and this distributor was supposed to go into my first car, and here I am robbing hardware and pieces from it to put this together, so that's kind of ironic. Get this thing slapped up on here. All right, getting ready to put the last spark plug in, and I'm gonna have to reuse one of the old ones. I'll just clean it up real good, but if you look, there's a little bit of a height difference between the new one and the old one, and I can't get the wire on with this one. So, but look at how nasty these things are. They are all fuel and oil soaked, built up big on them. It's really gross. I also noticed that one of the wires is all burnt out on the end. Ironically, the one that I'm having a hard time getting the wire on. And over here, one of them wasn't even on. So who knows how long this thing's been running on 7. All right, I got all the new plugs minus the one in there, all new wires, and all the tune-up stuff inside of the distributor. The last thing to do is to fill up this hole with, that's where the alternator bolts to. And so I got some thread sealant because it was leaking pretty bad out of there, and I think that's like part of the reason that the oil was leaking out. Obviously it had a valve cover leak before, but that was also a part of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll be able to test fire this thing for the first time with the new stuff, tune-up stuff. All right, well, that doesn't work right because it's the wrong thread, and that's why it leaks. Learn something new, but let's fire this thing up anyway and see what kind of a change we have. All right, here we go. Started a lot easier. Still a little shaky, but oh, so much more responsive. Oh my God. And the water's still shaking, but my God, that was about to jump out before. It's way better. Way smoother. And I haven't done anything with any timing or anything else. That's just through plugs, wires, and the distributor stuff. I know that these 400s aren't really close to rev, and it's set to 5500. It's probably a little bit too high, but I didn't have the right screwdriver to change it, and I didn't know if the rev limiter worked, so let's go. So the other good thing with doing the plugs and wires and the tune-up and stuff is it kind of gives you a fresh basis to start tuning your car from, without the advantage of modern electronics and stuff. These old engines, you can basically, kind of ask them what the issue is. One of the best ways is, through reading the spark plugs. There's a lot of charts and stuff like that. If you want to look that up, how to read spark plugs, just Google that. It'll tell you a whole lot. These ones have been really badly gas soaked, and I thought that it was just maybe super over carbureted, but it was obviously having a very bad ignition problem. So we're going to start from square one. I had been anticipating switching the carburetor, and I want to go out and say that that's probably like one of the best things that you can spend your money on one of these older cars. A lot of the time you get them and the carburetor's 20, 30 plus years old. It's been screwed around with by a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing, and things dried up, messed up, you know, and so I always think that that's like one of the best places that you can do is just get a fresh one to start from. I have started running Motorcraft 2 barrels. You can get those as cheap as like $60-something a piece off of eBay. You really can't beat the cost of that, and they work pretty well on like your real smaller V6 and small V8s. My Track Jeep has one and it works pretty well. I've had one a couple of Grand Wagoneers, that's what they came factory with, and they work well. So I'm going to leave that alone, but I just wanted to make that point. The other point I wanted to make too is vacuum leaks, and I didn't change timing on this, but all of that stuff is very key in having these older motors run well. And if you get one of these maximized and at its full potential, they're a lot of fun. I love these old traditional motors, the sound of them and stuff. You know, so just food for thought when you're working on one of these old school. All right, so free revving at super high to check the rev limiter probably wasn't the best idea, but it sure was pretty fun and cool. So I'm gonna kind of show a little bit of this procedure of how to set it a little bit lower. What you do is you turn the key, power on, and then what you do is you go in here to the Pertronics module, and you turn it clockwise until it stops, and then counterclockwise until it stops, and then it should start flashing. All right, so you gotta plug the power in, but here's the beeps. You can see them flashing. They do slow ones and then fast ones. So there's a fast one, 1, 2, 3. So I'll do it again from the start. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. So that's 5,200 RPMs. That's where we're gonna set this at. Other little things I did on the maintenance video was I just took a little bit of time and kind of cleaned up some of the spark plug wires and stuff so that they're like, it's not super neat, but they're kind of where they need to be. And another thing that I did to this car that I didn't mention is I put a stock gas tank back in it. I actually bought a parts car that I made a bunch of money on, so I'm not going to put any cost towards it or take any cost off of it, but it's just something that I added. That other fuel cell that was in here draws from the top. I've had a lot of problems with that thing over the years, so that's also helped this car run a little bit better. I advanced the timing a little bit, and it seems like it made quite a difference. I don't have any water bottles to put on the motor tonight to show the shaking of it, but you should be able to hear how much quicker this thing revs up and starts right now. But what a difference a couple of degrees of timing makes. I can't wait to get this thing out for its next test drive. Running pretty good now. If you go back and watch the video of the first test drive on this car, what a change. This thing is a total monster for the cost of a couple $100 and a few hours worth of labor. Plugs, wires, tune-up, correct gas tank, set the timing, and this car is totally different. You see the donuts and stuff, but man, driving the car back and forth up and down the street was shockingly quick car for having a stock motor. And so again, this video not really instructional, but more of kind of a guideline of, you know, build a balanced car, get the thing out there, get it working, have fun with it, and don't focus on building big power. Put your effort into building a well-balanced car.